Dregs joins us on our Firehouse Subs hotline this morning, where the Edmonton Oilers, with one of those victories where everything goes right, like Nuge scores, Hyman scores, Draisaitl scores, McDavid scores, Stuart Skinner with the shutout. And we were saying this morning, there's been other games this year, Dregs, where you're like, ooh, are they back? Are they back? But they haven't been able to string anything together. And that's what needs to happen here, right? They need to build off this victory with a 5-game homestand coming up.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that's entirely believable and likely what's going to happen. Now, are they going to run the table? No, probably not. I mean, the opposition comes ready to play, and the parity that we're seeing across the National Hockey League, I don't recall us seeing it for such a sustained period of time to start a year, right? And that's where we're at, 25 plus games in. But I also think that when you look at the Oilers lineup in particular, did we not all expect Zach Hyman to have impact and influence? But he also needed some time to get going. You don't just step back into the greatest league in the world and, just run the table. As I said earlier, you can't do that. So he's now rounding into form. He looks like he's got his game back. The loss of Nugent Hopkins for a stretch, again, Ryan Nugent Hopkins is a bit underappreciated, in my opinion, across the National Hockey League. And yet, he's back into the mix, and he just quietly goes about his offensive business. Defensively, he's a real good player. So the pieces are all there now, right? So, they're starting to feel good about themselves, and maybe 1 or 2 games can do that. Not flip the switch entirely, because out of respect, the other team is ready. And there's some good teams that they're going to face in a short period of time here. But that looked more like the complete Oilers team than we've seen at varying points to this stage of the regular season.
And obviously, Darren, goaltending is a lightning rod topic here. We were heading into the weekend, with people chattering about an expected Pittsburgh trade or something, and then they get the shutout. Bingo, bango, we're coming after the weekend, and it's all laid to rest. So how much does that turn down the temperature? Performance from Stuart Skinner, getting a shutout where he got his first career one. And, just where are we at on that front in terms of going into the weekend? We're expecting a deal coming out of the weekend, and it's all smoke and mirrors.
Okay, and I get it because we live it, and this is the world that I work in, the insider world, and I'm good with speculation, right? I'm okay with the rumor mill churning things out, but our job is to separate fact from fiction. And even though Kyle Dubas and the Pittsburgh Penguins are open to offer on just about anything, when that rumor broke on Tristan Jarry, there was really no substance to it. We're just, the media is connecting dots. And you can appreciate why that is. At that point, there appeared to be a growing need for some sort of goalie change in Edmonton. So Jerry makes some sense. I get it. The resume isn't terrible, but are we sure he's an upgrade? And I think the answer to that is no. How could you be sure? So change for the sake of change? Yeah, maybe if you get to that place where you don't have a choice. But I don't think that Stan Moman and the Edmonton Oilers feel that way. And, then you come off the shutout and you're feeling pretty good about yourself if you're Stu Skinner. But the unfortunate reality with goaltending, you're only as good as your last game, your last start. And so I don't think it's fair to expect that, he's going to shut the teams out moving forward here on a regular basis. That's ridiculous to suggest, but he knows that he needs to be better. And the body of the work tells us that he's capable of rounding into form. I had a conversation. It's a little bit different given the quality of the goalie here, but I had a conversation the other day with somebody with the Ottawa Senators who said, hey, I asked about goaltending. Linus Ullmark, is this a goaltender that needs to be better? And the answer was, yeah, he needs to be better. But the history of Linus Ullmark at the NHL level is he is perennially a slow starter. Okay, well, that doesn't mean that the Ottawa Senators have to go out searching for it. They've already replaced their goaltending situation, so there's patience there. And I think Bowman and company have learned over time with Stu Skinner and Cal Pickard that, look, there's going to be some bumps on the path. There just is. But we've got to be better collectively defensively. The offense has to come together like it did the last game. And this guy, either Pickard or Stu Skinner, have to be able to make the saves we need them to make. And if that happens, then the goaltending issue will kind of drift away.
The one other, just on the goaltending front, whether it be for the Oilers or anybody else, the one name that seems to be like he's going to get moved is Chicago and Laurent Brossoit. Is that something that you would expect to have happen? Because that's been out there for the last few days.
It's been out there for a bit, yes.
Yeah.
But again, I'll submit, what is he? And is he an upgrade? You know, like to this point, Brossoit has essentially been a backup goaltender in his NHL career. That's what he's been. So, you know, I guess it's possible that he gets moved. You know, where, you know, hey, we've talked a lot about Edmonton with reason. You know, again, the most recent game aside, you know, look at what's gone on in Winnipeg. You know, prior to their last game, you know, this is a team that with Connor Hellebuyck on the sideline had no choice but to give the reins to Eric Comrie. Is Eric Comrie, you know, strong enough as a starting goaltender to, you know, weather the storm for the next 4 or 5 weeks? We're going to find that out. But he was getting pretty nervous. The heat was probably elevating in Winnipeg to a point as well. So I don't know. Again, I keep going back and forth on the goaltending scenario with the Edmonton Oilers because I don't see a goalie out there that you can convince me is an upgrade. I just don't see it. I know. Like that's the thing here. Dregs, we talk about it so much. I don't see it.
Yeah, we just always talk about like names will pop up.
Yeah,
and if they are an upgrade, it's unrealistic target.
Well, right. Yeah,
and then you know. The other side of it is just sake for the change's sake to try to shock the team. But if the team can shock themselves and get things going here, then that at least buys you a lot of time if you feel like that's necessary, right? So
goaltending, high quality goaltending can mask a lot of problems, right? But not very often does a goaltender single-handedly win you a hockey game. A save here or there can seal a win, no doubt about that. But the issues that the Oilers have been dealing with for the better part of this season aren't all on the shoulders of Stu Skinner and Cal Pickard. I mean, we all watch closely. That's just not real.
No, they've been a train wreck defensively too for a lot of the years.
They have been. They have been. And I thought Leon Draisaitl last week was excellent after, I guess it was the Dallas debacle, wasn't it? Right?
Yeah, where, it was the Dallas game. They all spoke.
You know, he came out and he goes, look, I'm sure the goalies will tell you that they need to be better. But how many grade A chances do these guys have to face before we wake up as a team? So that's where they're at. Look, if you're going to make a meaningful difference in goal, you've got to do it in the off season. And I know that the Colorado Avalanche last year are the outlier, but as Noodles, Jamie McLennan reminded us all last week, check back on Blackwood and Wedgwood last year after that deal. I mean, they were just okay, and Colorado got bounced early in the playoffs. And that didn't go the way that everyone expected or hoped with the goalie change. Now, this year's a different animal. Now, let's see, you know, whether or not goaltending is going to be part of what appears to be a juggernaut in Colorado. Maybe, but yes, Chris McFarland deserves credit for making a very bold change, a full positional change in season last year. It's really, really hard, but not very often are you able to do that, especially in goal.
Darren Dreger joins us on the Firehouse Subs hotline this morning. I want to get to that juggernaut in Colorado in just 1 second, but where is the trade market at? Like, are we going to see it? Now, this is a league question, not an Oilers question. Are we going to see any movement before Christmas, or is it going to be like most other years where, you know, it gets to February before things really start moving?
Yeah, I don't have a hard answer for you.
Yeah.
I feel like we should see some activity before Christmas, but what are we talking about here? You know, kind of moving deck chairs type minor of stuff, change, as you said earlier, for the sake of change, probably minor stuff. But it's only because where we're at in the standings again here, guys. And I know like I sound like a broken record, but, you know, look at the standings this morning. There's one Canadian team that's in the playoff matrix right now, and that's the Montreal Canadiens. But it's not like the other 6 Canadian teams are dead and buried, not by a long shot. You know, they're a win, 2, 3 wins away from, you know, not only being, you know, in the playoff picture, but challenging for top spot in each division. I mean, that's how tight it is. So unless we see a significant injury, and we've seen a lot of injuries to this point of the year, I feel like it's going to be stingy on the trade front. But I do know, just based on the managers that I talked to, that at least the trade discussions have amplified, I would say, in the last week or so.
Colorado. Still,
yeah.
I mean, they just, they're not slowing down. They are absolutely rolling over teams.
Yeah.
It almost is the point where if I'm an Avs fan, I'm like, this has got to be too good to be true. Like,
Well, you hope you
like,
have some
when do they run into some sort of mini wall here, Dregs?
Well, and they will, right? They will. How they manage that mini lull, and mini is probably a very appropriate word, because I don't see Colorado going on a 3, 4, 5, 7 game losing skid. I just don't see it. I mean, they're too strong offensively. On any given night, you've got, of course, Nate McKinnon doing what he does every year. Marty Necas has not slowed down for the most part since getting his extension. And then you look at how they push from the back end. We've already talked about goaltending. So where's the weakness in the Colorado Avalanche? I'm sure McFarland and Joe Sakic look at their lineup organization and go, yeah, well, we could add a bit of depth here. That's what GMs do. That's what hockey operations departments do, because they're looking for the deep push into the playoffs. But right now, I don't see the weakness. I don't. They're loaded top to bottom.
Another team in that division quickly here, Darren, the Minnesota Wild, and that's the Oilers. They'll kick off that 5-game homestand 8-0-2 in their last 10. And an interesting narrative coming in with Jesper Wallstedt as well, playing the way he's playing in goal for the Wild.
Goofy.
Your thoughts on the scout, the pre-scout for the Wild ahead of tomorrow's game?
Well, I'll tell you what, they've got a boatload of confidence, and you've touched on why. I don't know what it is about Bill Guerin and really the Minnesota Wild in general. They always seem to have that goalie, right? Like somebody that just, and I'm not going to say that he comes out of nowhere. That's not fair to him. But they always have one guy in the mix that just finds a way to get red hot. And then they ride that guy. Not too long ago, it was Gustafsson. Fleury had his moments, with the Minnesota Wild, obviously. So, I didn't think that the Minnesota Wild were the team that we saw early in the year, where they were stumbling and they couldn't get going. And Kaprizov didn't look like, he had his usual swagger, and all of the pieces of the Minnesota Wild seemed somewhat disconnected. It felt like they were going to find their way, and they found their way, right? And maybe it's just the quality of goaltending has dug them out of a couple of holes that allows you to maybe breathe a little bit more. The confidence again elevates the transition game. Your goalies don't feel like your defense don't feel like every time they make a mistake in the defensive zone, it's ending up in the back of their net. Now they can breathe a little bit. They can get their transition game going. I just feel like the team we're seeing now, not because they're on a bit of a heater here, but the game that the Minnesota Wild are playing now is more the game that I thought we'd see from Minnesota at the beginning of the year. I mean, I think most of us had them tabbed as being one of the better teams in the Western Conference. Top team, maybe. That's saying a lot when you look at, we've already talked about Colorado. Yeah. Vegas has to find a way, maybe with stability in goal, with Carter Hart about to make his way. We'll see. But Minnesota fits into that conversation as one of the top teams in the West for sure.
Drags, good stuff, man. As always, we appreciate the time. Thanks a lot.
Okay, guys, have a great week.
There you go. It's Darren Dreger from TSN, of course, the Ray and Drags podcast.